It's now time to texture our character. For texturing, we're going to use polypaintingZBrush. Just before we proceed though, I just want to make one thing absolutely clear, that polypainting is not a professional grade texturing tool. It's absolutely fine for what we can use it for now, which is going to be something more concepting-like in terms of texture quality. But if you're doing this for production, if you're doing a realistic human for production or anything which requires any kind of realistic texturing, ZBrush is not adequate for the job. Then you need a tool such as Mari for that. But again, for this task here, it's perfectly fine, and it's really good for concepting out stuff and just trying out different color schemes. If you're using something Mari, for instance, it's really hard to play around with different textures, but ZBrush is really cool for that. You can very quickly get different iterations out and just try out different color palettes and shape language when it comes to the texturing and all that. So what is polypainting? Polypainting is essentially a system where every single vertex gets a color. So if you zoom all the way in here, we can assign a color to each vertex. And this is pretty cool in the way that you don't need UV map to texture. So you can do concept sculpting and you can get textures on your model without any UVs. That's really cool because UVs are, as we saw in some forum videos, they take time to do and they can be really tedious. And if you're doing concepting, you don't want to spend time with that. So that's a strength of polypainting, that you don't need UVs. A disadvantage is, as every vertex has a color, it means that the texture resolution is directly tied to the poly count, which is really bad. Let's say you want to paint an 8K map. Like as I said before, if I want to do this for production, the head here will probably be at least 2 8K maps here. So an 8K map has 64 million pixels. So 2 8K maps would then be almost 130 million pixels, which means you need 130 million polygons to even get close to that. And you can't do that. Here we're dealing with almost 3 million. So the texture resolution we're getting here is terrible compared to something like what we get in something like Mari. But again, this is fine for now because we're going for something soft. We're not going for full realism. And it will be viewed at this distance here. The distance we already have our camera. And maybe something like this if we were to zoom in a bit. But we're not dealing with this kind of resolution. We don't need specific texturing for this close-up like this. So let's get started with it. The first thing we need to do, we need to change the matte cap to a neutral one. If you use any one of these, you can see the problem is, first off, they're displaying the model in different ways when it comes to the cavity. But also, they have color baked into them, which is a huge problem. So this is obviously like a reddish color, and this is more like a beigeish one, which means if we paint on top of this, this is going to tint our color map a lot. So I've done this mistake before, where I've been painting with the matte cap on, only to see that in Modo or Arnold or whatever you're using, it looks completely off. So when doing poly painting, I strongly recommend using this one, the Skin Shader 4. Because this is a very neutral one. It's very pleasant to look at as well. So before doing anything else, I need to do this on a layer. Well, there's also a disadvantage of poly painting. You don't have proper layers. So you can use regular layers here, but we don't have something like blending modes or anything like that. So it's a very primitive system which hasn't been really developed over the last couple of years. So let's just make a layer and call this polypainting. And you need to do this for every single subtool. And now we can just select now we can just set this to RGB. This is important. If this is set to C add, this is going to sculpt. If this is set to RGB, it's going to add color. If it's set to M, it's going to add material. If it's set to M RGB, it's going to add material and color. We don't want this. We only want RGB, which is simply just the color here. So we can just select the color we want from here, like a neutral skin color, and then we can just start painting it in. I would recommend disabling lazy mouse with this. So you can see when using the standard brush, you see this like line going after it. Just hit the L key to disable lazy mouse. Also when painting here, just stick to the regular standard brush. The standard brush is absolutely fine for this. So we do the same thing for the other objects. And make sure you're on the highest subdivision level as well. So I want this to be fairly desaturated and dark. Something like this. And we can paint it in here, or we can hit fill object. I find fill object not be 100% reliable, so I just paint it in just to be absolutely sure. And for the hair, I want this to be, let's see here, maybe like a more grayish. Yeah, let's make it like almost completely gray, like this. And then we can just fill in streaks. Oh, whoops, I made this on, I put this onto the projection layer. Let's put this on its own layer. And here it also told me, hey, you have to be on the highest level to make a new layer. So let's do that. Let's make sure we're on the highest level. And which you can also see down here if you use my interface. So make a new layer. I call it polypaint again. And now we can just fill it in. Big brush and just fill it in. So for this, I'll probably just add a couple of like streaks here. So something like very simple stuff. Something like, you know, just this kind of stuff, just to break it up a bit. So the hair is going to be very simple. The same with the shirt. Let's just add one to the buttons as well. Probably paint. And let's just make the buttons dark. And that's pretty much it what we're going to do for the buttons. Most of the time now is going to be spent on the head. We're also going to do some painting on the eyes as well. But the majority is going to be time spent on the head. And also the majority of this video will be time-lapsed. So we're not going to... you're not going to see me paint all this by hand here in real time, because that makes no sense. Because I'm going over this and just really refining it as I go. But I'll do the beginning in real time. And I'll also explain what I'm doing. So the first thing we need to do before really starting with the painting is we need to just get into some quick color theory here. So this is an old bit of color theory, which simply means that the top part, or the bony bits, are more yellow. The area around the eyes is more red, and the area regarding the mouth is more blue. So this is going to be my starting point. You can see I'm going to add crazy colors from the beginning, and then we're going to make them more neutral as we go along. This gives us really nice color variation. And if you look at any reference, you can see that we have a lot of color variation in skin. It's not just this beige color, or of course, depending on the ethnicity you're going for. You don't just have this one color. You really have a lot of color in the skin. So that's something I would highly recommend looking at. Looking at reference and looking at yourself in the mirror and all that, and just getting the tiniest variations when it comes to value and color. So let's start with this. We have our material, we have our layer set up, we have our brush set up, and now we just need to start painting. So as I said, I'll use symmetry mode, and I'll change this to spray or color spray. Spray is just going to spread the brush around, like so, and color spray is going to do the same thing, but add some slight hue variation to it. So we're going to stick with, let's just stick with color spray for now. And the first thing I want to do is I want to set the values for the face. But that is simply just mean which area is going to be darker and which area is going to be brighter. Because the values are really important. So I just want the area around the eyes to be a bit darker. And maybe I think I want the ears to be a bit darker as well. And this is just the default smooth brush here. You can set this to an alpha, and we're going to do that a bit later as well, like a bit more aggressive alpha. I just want this to be like a smooth, nice result for now. And we're going to go over this a lot. So don't worry about getting this right on first try. Just blocking out the overall values. I want these regions here just to be a bit darker. Maybe having some darkness just around the hair as well. And as a hotkey here, you sample the color here by hitting the C key. So you can see now over here, the hotkey or the color is changing based on where I'm hitting here. This is really important later on. So we have some basic values laid down. Let's refine a little bit. And I'm going to go crazy with some color here, just going all over the place. And it's going to be extreme. It's going to be too extreme here, and that's fine. We just want color variation. Actually, for color variation, we're going to use this one, Alpha 07. This is really nice because it gives you this like speckled result like this. So when working on this and working in general, I always go to the extreme and then I take it back. Because it's a lot easier to take an extreme version to a tame version than to take a tame version to an extreme one. So this is what I'm going to be doing for the entire duration of this video. I'm simply going to hold on the C key, smooth stuff out like this, just to blend stuff together. I'm going to pick colors here. I'm going to like block it out, just trying out some colors, just getting some coloration like this, and then I'm going to get closer and closer to this neutral skin color again, just really getting some variation and then taking it back to a neutral face. So we're starting with the more crazy colors and just bringing it more neutral as we go. Just
and I'm back.
And Morten is back.
Yay.
Morten keeps popping in and out of this video, so welcome back, Morten.
Thanks. I thought I'd give my 2 cents on the colors because they look awful right now.
Yeah, this is why we have Morten here, so he can help me. I'm like, green is great for the color, and Morten is like, no.
But this is like, it's a good starting point, right? Yeah. And you remember the color chart is really, it's something that I never thought about until I sort of looked into some more traditional painting.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it comes from. It doesn't come from science. There's nothing scientific about it. Well, kinda like there's blood around your eyes and nose and mouth and all that. But you know, this is an artistic one. This is pure like what looks good. So here we're also like thinking about what we talked about earlier, the feeling you want to convey. This is not a nice grandpa. How would you paint Mr. Nice Grandpa? He would be, you know, warm colors. Would you paint Nice Grandpa with yellow, blue, and green colors in his face? He looks like a sick Muppet.
Exactly. Like you'd probably want to fill in more of his cheeks with a lot more red, a lot more warmth, a lot more softness. Yeah. Whereas this isn't. Oh, look at that material. Yeah.
We also changed to the flat material quite a lot because then you can actually see the texture. It's so easy to get blinded by like a really cool matte cap. And remember, the matte cap here is not what you're seeing in Modo and when you're rendering or whatever rendering you're using. What you're seeing is the flat color. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, because all matte caps, even the very neutral ones, like this one, there's still some highlights in there, and they still might, like, you can see it brightens up your material a little bit, so it's never like the true representation of your material.
Not at all. And also because the shader, I mean, this is a shader in ZBrush, and it's not the same. So essentially when you're texture painting, you want the shader to be as close as possible to the shader in your app or in your software, which it isn't. So then we just have to review it with flat colors. But this is the exact same process, like the theory for sculpting as well. You start from general and then you work your way to the specifics.
Yeah, and that's why like it doesn't make any sense to really start just putting in really nice refined colors everywhere. If you have these blocky big areas, it's a lot easier to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the things you should really keep in mind is like we talked about before, is like he is a nasty dude, right? Yeah. And having these really red shot eyes, a little more red on the nose.
Blue nose and like, you know, this kind of like nasty colors.
Yeah.
It's, you want the feeling to go through all, like the entire character.
Like you feel like this guy is sick.
Yeah.
You know, you don't feel like he's healthy.
And that's been, I know we've been talking about this a fair few times throughout this tutorial, but that's, I can't stress enough how important it is to figure out the feeling. At work, I've been struggling so much with directors, visual effects supervisors, not knowing what they want the character to feel like. For instance, if I'm a texture artist on a show and they want me to texture the character, I need to know, is this a good guy or a bad guy? You know, he has... No, but don't worry, Henning. He's just made of like crocodile skin. Yeah, but that doesn't help me. I need to know, like, is the crocodile skin like soft or is it like warm from battle? You need to know this. If it's a sad Mr. Crocodile Man, or you know, if it's like a really young and ambitious and nice Mr. Crocodile Man, you know, vastly different ways of texturing it. Yeah. So there's so like I feel like half the problems we have with like direction and like not knowing where we're supposed to go is simply due to not knowing what you want, what emotional output you want from the character. If you don't know that, you can't really do anything.
I think this goes again with what we've been saying before about the sculpting. Like, it affects all stages of your character, right?
Yeah.
From colors to sculpting to details. It's all of it.
Because a choice, like, let's say, should we give this guy here a sharper or a softer nose? It's not a better or worse choice. They're just different choices. A sharp or a soft nose, they're not objectively better or worse choices. What you have to ask yourself is, what's right for the character? What do you want the character to feel like? If you want him to feel gnarly and old and like depressing, give him a sharp nose.
Yeah.
You want him to be like a cool grandpa or like a soft, nice spoken grandpa, you give him a soft one. Not better or different, not better choices, just like, different choices.
Think this guy, like, imagine him as Death, you know, versus Santa Claus.
Yeah.
It's like, Santa Claus is like the opposite of this, right? This is like the Grinch.
Yeah.
He's not a nice guy. He doesn't want nice things.
Hates Christmas.
Hates Christmas so much. Oh, yeah. But you can see in the raw diffuse texture how nasty his eyes are. Like, it's really bloodshot, and it doesn't feel very good.
Yeah.
Which is perfect.
Yeah. But also keep in mind that this here is, due to time reasons, we cannot paint a proper texture here. And like I was very clear on earlier, this is not a professional texturing tool. ZBrush is, it's just so far away from being a reliable texturing tool. Maybe if you're doing something like very cartoony and hand painted,
it's really nice for that actually, because you get this immediate feedback when painting directly on the mesh.
But when it comes to professional texturing, it's just not even close. Because if you're doing professional texturing for film, visual effects, TV, whatever, commercials, you need Mari. You can use something like Quixel or Substance Painter or something like that, but if you're doing like something more than like a 4K map, you just need it. There was just no discussion. The method you're working with as well is vastly different. If I were to make this guy for production, I've done similar things in the past, and you don't hand paint it. You use photographs as your reference.
But it's like with anything, it's using reference, and it's not you as much as you want the work to be all your own.
Yeah.
You will never ever be able to paint the amount of detail that is in human skin
impossible.
by hand. You can't do it.
Like we talked about in one of the former videos, if you were to do like the pores by hand, it doesn't matter. What takes me 5 minutes to do in Mari and Surface Mimic would take you 2 weeks to sculpt, and it wouldn't even be as good. Particularly for texturing. If you want photorealistic textures, you need to use photographs. Sure, you can paint it by hand if you're a crazy person, or if certain things you can hand paint.
It just won't be as good.
No, maybe you could have a base with hand painting, but you need photographs. It's not
you could totally base this, like do a base like this in ZBrush with poly painting, right? For you, so you have the coloring areas. If you want something specific, and then do like some overlays with some real textures to give you the final base. That's totally an option.
A texture painter is only as strong as his image library. I mean, if it looks, a lot of guys are wondering why do the characters look hand painted and not realistic? Because you hand painted them. It's not a hard question, guys. It's very simple. Even for eyes as well, like you can hand paint them, but like the way we're doing now is kind of a cheat. It's gonna look all right here, but if you want realism, you need to look at like a real iris and project that on top. Yeah,
and like if you look at that's one of the things where I think the first time I really noticed it, that was in The Life of Pi. You look at the tiger's eyes, where you actually see you have sculpted detail in the iris.
Yeah,
where you have these layers and layers of fibers, which are really nice.
So we're looking at reference here actually for this kind of stuff. Like you just saw me bring up a reference picture there, which I'm bringing up on my second monitor. Because I don't know what they look like. I have an idea what they look like. I know an iris is built up from a lot of layers. Like you see all the stuff we're doing now. What I'm painting in here isn't a pattern. What I'm painting in here is a shadow. Because if you look at an iris, it has like tons of fibers. And it's, sure there is some different like variations in hue and all that. But nearly all variation inside the iris, it comes from just lighting. What I'm painting now isn't highlight. What I'm painting now is just something going up.
Yeah.
It's just the top layer of something. But that said, you can get away a lot with eyes because they're gonna be usually out of far away. But if you're going close up, like I would
Yeah, then you definitely need some sculptural details in there.
And not just like painted, but like actually, like Morten says, like actual sculptural details.
Because if you find an eye, if you try to Google for eyes where you find it with light shining at it at just the right angle, you can actually see that the iris, the fibers in the iris start to do like make cast shadows. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing to look at because it's not something we see up close that often.
Look at macro photography of eyes. It is crazy stuff. It almost looks like a jungle in there, or like a swamp or something like that.
Yeah, it's very, that's again one of those very alien things on the human body.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And like we said before, your eyes needs to work. So here I'm just adding some coloration to it. Instead of it just being like pure blue, I'm just adding some green to it. And also here, you just notice, this is something we were talking about in another video as well. Notice that we're only painting one eye.
I'm just gonna flip it over. There's no reason to do your work twice.
No,
really,
exactly.
it's
unless he has a cataract, so there is a specific reason, but you never do that. But like, it sounds absolutely ludicrous when we say you need to sculpt the eye, like you need to sculpt the wrinkles and you need to sculpt the iris. But if you want to reach like the full potential, if you want to reach like realism, you just have to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can fake it in texture map if it's from like a medium shot or something. But
once you get to this distance, it's game over.
It's game over. And also interesting stuff when it comes to like shading of the eyes. Like you have caustics. You don't think about that. Like the eye has real caustic. If there is like sunlight, it's caustics in the eyes. It's crazy stuff.
It's embedded in this like layer of liquid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that when light goes through there, you're gonna have some light that bends.
So this is what we mean, like with if you're doing something like, again, we work in visual effects. This is more specific for that, but just the detail level we go into for that.
And this obviously wouldn't apply for something like this because this is very stylized. Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to worry about it, and it's not like us trying to scare you away. It's just we're trying to inform people, sort of like this is what you could expect.
Yeah, exactly. And but also the reason this is stylized is actually an economic choice. We just literally can't sculpt this to be realistic for this tutorial. This tutorial was long enough already. If we were to do this like properly with groom and like with proper texturing, the texturing itself would be a 10-hour tutorial. It just literally can't be done. Something I would like to do in the future, like more training on like texturing training for production. That'd be very interesting.
And I think then you could really go into a lot of detail with, especially, oh man, eyes are so sexy. You could just do that.
Thank you, Morten.
But I mean, all of this sort of wraps up the texturing part of this, and it's like it's a really good base for something stylized that we want to present. And poly painting is a powerful tool for this, so don't underestimate it. But once you want to get further and do realistic texturing, we're just saying you can't really rely on it that much.